Hello, NDE narrator. I truly wish I could show my face to the world, but I'm not ready for that yet. That's why I'm using your platform to share my story. My name is Aaliyah. My father was a commander with Hamas until he was killed in a face-off with Israeli forces. Before he died, he ordered me to be locked up without food for 40 days, because I had an encounter with Jesus. It happened when I met an Israeli man who preached Jesus to me inside one of our tunnels, where we used to hold and execute captives. I'm 29 years old. I was born and raised in Gaza City, not far from Shujaa. My father is a senior Hamas commander, powerful, respected, and feared. In our home, Islam was life. We woke up to Quranic recitations, prayed 5 times daily, fasted during Ramadan, and listened to the words of imams like they were commands from Allah himself. I memorized the Quran before I turned 12. I grew up believing that jihad was the highest honor, that Jews were our sworn enemies, and Christians were lost fools worshipping a false god. My father didn't raise me to be a soft daughter. He raised me to be a soldier. At 23, I was given control of one of our most important underground tunnel prisons near Rafah, a hidden detention site where spies, traitors, and especially Christians were broken. It was dark, cold, and far away from the sound of mercy. And I was in charge of it all. I didn't hesitate. I gave orders like my father. I had grown numb to pain, especially the pain of others. These prisoners were the enemies of Islam, and I believed I was doing Allah's work. Inside those tunnels, I ordered interrogations, arranged beatings, and carried out mock executions. I watched grown men cry like children. I saw women beg for death, and I felt nothing, especially when it came to Christians. Something about them always made my blood burn. They were soft. They whispered prayers in the dark. Some of them even sang. One man cried out, "Jesus, forgive them," as we whipped him. I spat in his face and told him Jesus wouldn't save him here. We laughed as he was dragged away, never to be seen again. For me, it wasn't cruelty. It was duty. I believed every Christian was a cancer in Gaza, a threat to our faith, our people, and our cause. Until the day one of them changed everything. It was a hot afternoon when the radio crackled with news. A unit near Beit Hanoun had captured an Israeli man trying to cross back through a collapsed area of the border fence. We thought he was a spy. They brought him in blindfolded, hands tied, blood soaking through the side of his shirt. The men said he hadn't cried or begged, even as they beat him during transport. He's stubborn. One of the guards warned me. Let's see how long that lasts. I ordered him to be taken to cell 4, a deep chamber beneath the first level. No light, no water, just a small vent and a steel door with a sliding hatch. He was to be executed in 3 days publicly. I had done this before. 3 days of pressure was usually enough to make anyone confess or beg for mercy. I didn't expect anything different this time. I didn't know yet that this man wasn't just Israeli. He was a Christian. I checked on him that night. His name was Yitzhak. He sat quietly in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees, whispering something under his breath. "Are you praying?" I asked him through the small opening in the door. He looked up, and I'll never forget his eyes, swollen but calm. "Yes," he said. "I'm speaking to my father." I laughed. "Your father? The one who let you be captured and beaten?" He didn't flinch. "My body is in chains," he replied, "but my spirit is free." His voice was soft but firm, like he had nothing to prove. "Jesus was beaten too," he added. "He died, but he rose again." I told him to be quiet, but something about his words stayed with me. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't even ask for water. He just kept whispering scriptures and calling me sister whenever I returned. No one had ever spoken to me like that in this place. Not with hatred, but with love. On the second day, I expected him to break. Most did. Hunger sets in. Pain deepens. Minds begin to unravel. But not him. He was weaker now, slower to respond. Blood had dried under his nose, and his lips were cracked. But when I asked if he was afraid of death, he looked up and said, "No, because I know where I'm going." "Do you?" I didn't answer. Something about the question stabbed at me. He continued, "You believe you're serving Allah. But tell me, has Allah ever loved you the way Jesus does?" I tried to stay angry, but I couldn't. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't trying to convert me. He was telling me the truth, as if it hurt him not to. He quoted Jesus. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And then he added, "That includes you." I stood outside that door for 10 minutes after he stopped speaking. My heart was racing. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel in control. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid on my cot and stared at the concrete ceiling. His voice echoed in my head. "Do you know where you're going?" I had always believed Islam was the truth, that martyrdom was the highest prize. But now I felt something I hadn't before, doubt. A small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. I tried to pray, to recite verses from the Quran, but none of it brought me peace. I dreamed of the man's face, bruised but shining. I saw him hanging on a cross like the Jesus I used to mock in those Christian leaflets we burned. In the dream, I was standing below him with blood on my hands. I woke up gasping for air, sweating and afraid. I told no one. I buried the feelings and tried to return to normal. But I knew something inside me was changing. I just didn't know how fast it would all break. On the third day, the execution order arrived. He was to be beheaded at dawn. I was expected to oversee the process, as I had many times before. I told myself it was just another traitor, another unbeliever. But as we pulled him from the cell, and he looked up at me with those same calm eyes, I couldn't move. He was barely standing, held up by 2 guards. Yet his face, it glowed. Not in some dramatic way, but with peace. "Thank you," he whispered to me, "for listening. Jesus loves you." The guards mocked him, pushed him forward. I followed silently as we brought him into the chamber. Just 4 walls, a concrete floor, and a single drain. He didn't resist. He didn't scream. He knelt and closed his eyes. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. I watched as the blade came down, fast and merciless. It was over in seconds. His blood spread across the floor. My knees gave way. Something in me shattered. I stared at that blood. It wasn't the first time I had seen death, but this was different. It was holy, pure, as if the ground itself was crying out. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. And then, in the silence, I heard a whisper. It wasn't audible, not with my ears, but I heard it inside me, deep and unmistakable. Aaliyah. It was my name, but not from any human mouth. It was like being known completely for the first time. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. They were already dragging the body away, laughing and shouting, but I stayed frozen. That whisper had pierced through years of hatred, fear, and pride. I walked back to my quarters, locked the door, and collapsed to the floor. I wept like a child, something I hadn't done in years. Not because I was weak, but because I had seen something stronger than death. And I knew then my life would never be the same again. I didn't leave the tunnel that day as the same person. I tried to hide it, but inside something had cracked open. The image of Yitzhak's peaceful face as he knelt to die kept playing in my mind like a film I couldn't pause. I returned to my daily routine, giving orders, managing shifts, handling reports, but nothing felt normal anymore. When I walked past cell 4, I felt a chill. I avoided looking at the floor where his blood had stained the concrete. At dinner, I sat beside my father, listening to him talk about strategy and resistance. I nodded when he praised a recent ambush in Khan Yunis, but I wasn't really there. I chewed slowly, tasting nothing. Even when I prayed, the words of the Quran felt distant. I recited them from memory, but my heart was somewhere else. I had always found strength in the rituals of Islam. Now they felt like empty steps. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, my fingers clutching the edge of the blanket like a child scared of the dark. My mind was loud. His voice, his smile, his last words. Jesus loves you. Why did he say that to me? Why didn't he hate me? I was part of the machine that killed him. I gave the order. I could have stopped it, but I didn't. And yet, he looked at me like I was someone worth saving. I couldn't understand it. I kept hearing the name Jesus in my thoughts. I told myself to stop thinking, to sleep, to move on. But the peace I had always found in obedience, in power, in control, it was gone. In its place was a storm I didn't know how to silence. I pulled the blanket over my head and whispered a prayer to Allah. But even then, It felt like the words vanished into silence. The next morning, I found myself drawn to one of the phones we had taken from a Christian prisoner months ago. It was still locked in the evidence drawer in my office. I told the guards I needed to inspect it for security reasons. Alone in my office, I powered it on. The screen lit up slowly. My hands trembled as I searched through the files. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. An app labeled simply Angel. I knew the word. It meant gospel. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the icon, fear rising in my chest. If anyone walked in and saw me. But I couldn't stop. I tapped it. The app opened, showing a simple Arabic interface. I scrolled through a list of books: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I clicked on John, and the first words struck like a blow to my heart. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read those lines over and over. The words felt alive. I couldn't explain it, but it was like something warm had entered the room. I kept reading, my eyes scanning the screen hungrily. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I read for hours. I kept the phone hidden under my desk, only taking it out when I was alone. The more I read, the more I felt something moving inside me, something I didn't have words for. At night, I dreamed of him. I saw Yitzhak standing beside a man with light surrounding him. The man didn't speak, but he looked at me with the same eyes Yitzhak had, full of love, not judgment. I woke up shaken but strangely calm. These weren't just dreams. They felt like encounters. I didn't know what to call them. All I knew was that I couldn't ignore them. The days passed, but I couldn't go back to who I was. I tried to stand in front of a prisoner during an interrogation, but I couldn't look them in the eye. When one of the guards asked me for permission to increase pressure on a detainee, I walked away without answering. I began to avoid the interrogation rooms altogether. I told the others I was tired, that I had a headache, that I had reports to finish. The truth was I couldn't bear the screams anymore. They echoed differently now. They reminded me of how far I had gone from whatever human used to mean. One morning, I found myself sitting in the far corner of my office whispering, "If you are real, show me." I didn't even know who I was speaking to. Allah, Jesus. I was confused, but I said it anyway over and over. "If you are real, show me." That afternoon, something changed. I stepped outside the tunnel for air. The sun was setting over Gaza, painting the sky in deep orange and red. I leaned against the wall and felt the breeze touch my face. It was the first time in weeks I had stepped outside alone. And in that quiet moment, I felt something. Not a voice in my ear, not a sound in the wind, but something deep inside me, like a stillness I had never known. The fear, the anger, the noise, they stopped. I felt peace. It was small, like a candle, but it was real. I breathed deeply and whispered again, "Jesus, if that was you, thank you." I wasn't ready to say I believed yet, but I couldn't deny that what I felt was not from anything I had known before. Not from Islam, not from war, not from power. It was gentle, and it was calling to me. From that moment, I began changing quietly. I stopped yelling at guards. I treated prisoners differently. When one Christian girl asked for a blanket during the night, I gave it to her without reporting it. I started spending more time alone, reading the Angel in secret, the story of Jesus healing the blind man, forgiving the woman caught in adultery, calming the storm. It stirred something in me I couldn't contain. I began to believe he was more than a prophet. I began to wonder if he was really who Yitzhak said he was. Still, I kept it all to myself. My father had started to notice my silence. At dinner one night, he looked at me and said, "Your eyes are not as sharp as they used to be. What's going on in that head of yours?" I smiled and told him I was just tired. He nodded but kept watching me. His eyes didn't leave mine for a long time. Then came the dream I will never forget. I was standing in a dark tunnel, alone. I could hear voices all around me, whispers in Arabic saying, "Traitor, infidel, liar." I was trembling. Then I saw a light appear at the end of the tunnel. It was bright, but not blinding. As it came closer, I saw him. Jesus. He didn't speak, but he reached out his hand. His eyes were full of compassion. Behind him, I saw the faces of the people I had hurt. But they weren't angry. They were smiling. I fell to my knees, weeping. He touched my shoulder, and I felt warmth flood my entire body. I woke up gasping, tears soaking my pillow. I sat up and whispered, "I believe. I don't understand everything, but I believe." And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than hate, bigger than Hamas, bigger than religion. I belonged to him. The next morning, I refused to enter the torture wing. One of the guards joked, "What happened? You lost your fire." I smiled and walked away. I didn't answer. I couldn't keep pretending. The person I used to be was gone. I still wore the uniform. I still lived in the same city, under the same roof as my father. But inside, I was no longer who they thought I was. I began to pray differently now. I didn't recite memorized verses. I just spoke to Jesus like he was there. I asked him to guide me, to change me, to help me understand what came next. I knew the risk. If anyone found out, I'd be accused of betrayal. My father would never show mercy, but I didn't care anymore. What I had found was worth more than my title, more than my safety. I was willing to lose it all for the peace I had tasted. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, I returned to my office and found my cousin Yara standing behind my desk, holding the prisoner's phone. I froze. Her eyes were wide with shock. "What is this?" she asked. I didn't answer. She tapped the screen, showing the Angel app. "You've been reading this?" I nodded slowly. "Why?" she whispered, as if afraid to hear the answer. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her everything, but fear gripped my throat. She left without another word. I knew what would happen next. And I was right. That night, during family dinner, my father didn't speak to me. When we finished, he asked me to follow him to his study. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly. "Is it true?" he asked. "Are you reading the book of the Christians?" I didn't deny it. I couldn't. I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes." His silence was worse than a slap. He stared at me for a long time, then whispered something under his breath I couldn't hear. Finally, he said, "You're no longer my daughter." He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. My file. He signed something, stamped it, and handed it to a guard standing outside. "She is to be arrested and held for investigation," he said coldly. Immediately, the guard hesitated, but followed orders. My hands were bound in front of me as I was led away. I heard my mother crying behind a closed door. My cousin wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't resist. I didn't beg. I walked quietly as they led me out of the house, into a car, and back to the same tunnels I once ruled. But this time, I wasn't going as a commander. I was going as a prisoner, and I knew this was just the beginning. They came for me at night, just like we had come for so many others before. The same knock, the same silence before the storm. My father didn't even look at me as the guards stepped into our home. I recognized their faces. Men I had trained, men who used to follow my orders. Now they stood over me with blank expressions, waiting to drag me away. One of them, Kareem, whispered, "I'm sorry." But I didn't answer. My wrists were tied with the same rope we used for prisoners. The metal door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked with them down the same streets where I once walked as a commander. My scarf slipped from my head, and I didn't bother fixing it. In that moment, I knew. Whatever I was before, it was gone now. I was no longer feared. I was no longer respected. I was a prisoner. The car stopped outside the ruined apartment block in Rafah. I knew this place like the lines in my palm. Beneath it ran the tunnel system I had once ruled. My feet moved automatically as they led me through the hidden entrance, down into the damp corridors. The smell of blood and damp concrete filled my nose. But this time, I wasn't walking through the tunnels as a shadow. I was walking into my own grave. The men didn't speak. They pushed me into a small room, the same interrogation chamber I had used so many times. The fluorescent light above flickered. The metal chair sat in the middle of the room, cold and waiting. They untied my wrists and shoved me into the seat. Then the door opened. 3 men entered. 2 I didn't know and 1 I did. Bilal. He had once trained under me. I had taught him how to break the will of others. Now he stood over me. Bilal didn't sit. He walked in slow circles around me, like a predator enjoying the smell of fear. I stared straight ahead, but I could feel his eyes on me. "Aaliyah," he said finally. "Or should I say, Miriam now?" I didn't respond. "Isn't that what the Christians call you?" he asked, his voice mocking. I stayed silent. He slapped the table in front of me hard enough to make me flinch. "You brought shame on us," he spat. "You betrayed your people, your father, your blood." My heart pounded, but I didn't look away. "You taught me how to deal with traitors," he continued, leaning close. "And now here you are." I could smell his breath. It made me sick. The other two men began reading from a file. Accusations. Converting to Christianity, spreading foreign religion, endangering state security, spying. I said nothing. What was there to say? I had crossed the line. Not with weapons, but with faith. The questioning lasted hours. They didn't beat me. Not yet. They didn't need to. Their words cut deep. They stripped me of my name, my title, my past. They mocked the Jesus I had come to love. "Did he whisper to you in the dark?" one said. "Did he promise you heaven if you betrayed your father?" I clenched my fists but said nothing. I thought of Yitzhak. I thought of his peace. I tried to hold on to that, but it was hard, especially when they brought in Yara, my cousin, my friend. She stood at the door and looked at me like I was a stranger. "You deserve what's coming," she said coldly. Then she spit in my face. The guards laughed. I wiped it away with the back of my sleeve and looked her in the eyes. "I forgive you," I whispered. That only made them angrier. "You're insane," one of the men said. "Let's see how long your faith lasts without food or water." They dragged me down the hallway to a cell. Cell 3. I had locked many people inside that room. Now it was my turn. The door creaked shut and the bolt slid into place. Darkness swallowed me. The walls were damp. The floor was rough. There was no bed, no toilet, no window. Just 4 walls and the memory of every scream I had ignored in this place. I sat in the corner, hugging my knees. Hunger came quickly. My stomach twisted. My throat felt dry. Hours passed. Maybe days. No water. No bread. Nothing. Only silence and darkness. When footsteps approached, my heart leapt, but they didn't come to help. They came to mock. "Where is your Jesus now?" One guard whispered through the slot. "Let him feed you. Let him rescue you." Then he laughed and walked away. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead to the wall. I didn't pray for escape. I prayed for strength. Time disappeared in that cell. I didn't know if it was day or night. I tried to measure the passing hours by my pain, by how long I could go without swallowing, without crying, without falling into a half-sleep full of nightmares. The cell smelled of mold and old sweat. I remembered the Christians who had begged me for mercy on this same floor. I remembered how I had ignored them, how I had told them Jesus wouldn't come. Now I was here. I was the one crying. I was the one waiting. I wept quietly, ashamed. My hands shook. My lips cracked. I curled into a ball, pressing my face against the cold stone. And in that moment, I understood something I never had before. I understood their pain, their prayers, their hope. I understood what it felt like to be powerless, to be nothing. I wasn't the daughter of a commander anymore. I was the daughter of no one. Every sound became louder in the silence. The drip of water in the distance, the footsteps above, the shuffling of rats in the corner. My body was weakening fast. I could feel it. I couldn't sit up without my vision going black. My bones ached. My heart felt heavy. And yet, in all that darkness, something strange happened. I started remembering the scriptures. Words I had read in secret now returned like whispers in the night. "I will never leave you nor forsake you. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." I repeated them slowly, like a child learning to speak. They didn't take away the pain, but they gave me peace. Not the kind that stops the suffering, but the kind that makes you endure it. I wasn't alone in that cell. I knew that now. Even if I died there, I was his. I belonged to Jesus. And that was enough. The days blended into each other like ink in dirty water. I lost count after the first week. There was no food, no water, no light. Just my breath getting slower. Just my heart pounding weaker. Every part of my body screamed for relief. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My lips were cracked open and dry. I would dream of water, rivers, rain, cold glasses on hot days, but wake up to the thick, hot air of the tunnel, choking in the dark. My stomach no longer growled. It had given up, like everything else. My skin felt tight over my bones. I could barely sit up. I dragged myself from corner to corner, searching for any drop of moisture, even licking the damp walls. The horror of thirst was worse than any pain I had ever caused. It was a punishment, yes, but somehow it felt more like a fire burning away who I used to be. By the end of the second week, my mind began to slip away from me. I started to see things, shadows that moved, lights that flickered where there were none. Sometimes I saw faces, the faces of the prisoners I had once tormented. I saw the Christian woman who used to sing even while bleeding. I saw the man who wept as I laughed at his prayer. I saw Yitzhak. His eyes stared straight into mine. "Forgive them," he whispered again and again. I tried to close my eyes, but it didn't help. They were still there. Their voices circled around me like wind. "You're one of us now," they seemed to say. "Now you understand." I wanted to scream, but my throat was too dry. I wanted to run, but my legs could no longer carry me. The memories became my prison now, more than the four walls. I had nowhere left to hide from them, not even inside myself. I cried for the first time in days, but no tears came. My body had nothing left to give. I lay on my side, curled up like a child, pressing my head into my own arm to block out the visions. I began whispering, please God," over and over, but I didn't know what I was asking for. Death, freedom, forgiveness, maybe all three. My voice was so weak. I wasn't sure if the words were real or just echoes in my head. I thought I was dying, and for a while I hoped I was. I begged him to take me. I didn't want to suffer anymore. I didn't want to remember anymore. "Let me go," I whispered. "I can't do this." And that's when I heard it. Not a sound outside. A voice inside. Clear, gentle, firm. "Not yet. I'm not done with you." I stopped breathing for a moment. I knew it wasn't from me. That voice didn't come from memory or madness. It was real. It was the same presence I had felt when I first read the Angel. The same peace I felt when I whispered Jesus' name in secret. It had returned. Not to rescue me from the pain, but to remind me I wasn't alone. I stayed still, afraid to move, afraid it would leave. But it didn't. It lingered like a hand on my shoulder. I closed my eyes and thought of Yitzhak. His calm, his eyes, his last words. "Jesus loves you." I saw him clearly in my mind, kneeling on the floor before the blade, his lips moving in prayer. He had peace even in death. I wanted that. I didn't care if I lived. I just wanted that peace before I died. So I did the only thing I could. I began to pray. Not with strength, not with tradition, but with desperation. I whispered the Psalms. I remembered some from the app one had read so many nights ago. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." My voice cracked, but I kept going. Though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, I paused. That was where I was. In the valley. In the shadow. But the next line gave me something to hold on to. "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." I repeated it again and again. "You are with me." I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel holy. I didn't even feel alive. But I felt him. Somewhere deep inside me. I wasn't alone anymore. Not in this cell. Not in this suffering. Jesus was there. And even if the world outside hated me, even if my father had abandoned me, even if my body failed, I knew he had not. I clung to that truth like it was oxygen. By the fourth week, my body began to shut down. My legs no longer moved. My arms felt like wood. I could barely lift my head. My breath came slow and shallow. I was sure my organs were collapsing. My back ached constantly. My skin clung to my bones. I couldn't speak anymore. I could only mouth the words of scripture, silently, like a prayer written in dust. My kidneys began to ache. A deep, hot pain in my sides that pulsed with every heartbeat. I knew the signs. I had seen it before in prisoners. My body was shutting down. I smiled a little, even as the pain deepened. So this is how I die, I thought. But there was no fear, just surrender. I had nothing left to offer. No strength, no pride, no hope in this world. But I gave him what I still had. my heart, my soul, my last breath. And I whispered, "I am yours." Laying on the cold floor, I remembered everything. The blood I had spilled, the names I had forgotten, the prayers I had mocked. It all came back, wave after wave. And yet, I didn't feel condemned. I felt broken, yes, but not cursed. I felt like something was ending. Like the person I used to be, Aaliyah the feared, the commander, the daughter of Hamas, was dying in this cell. And in her place, something else was being born. I didn't know what to call it yet. I just knew I wasn't the same. I had reached the end of myself. I had no reputation left, no identity, no future. But in that emptiness, I found something more real than anything I had ever known. I found Jesus. Not in a church, not in a book, but here, in the dirt, in the hunger, in the silence. And I told him, "Even if I die here, I am yours. Forever." I don't remember falling asleep. I don't even know if I was asleep or slipping away into death. Everything was quiet. My heartbeat had slowed so much I couldn't feel it anymore. My chest barely moved. I lay on my side, bones against the concrete, waiting for the end. But then something strange happened. In the silence, in the deep cold, I felt something warm begin in the center of my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fever. It felt alive, like a small flame. It didn't burn. It pulsed, slow, gentle, like someone had lit a candle inside my ribs. I opened my eyes. I thought I was hallucinating, but the warmth didn't stop. It spread through me, first into my shoulders, then down my arms, then into my back. My breathing changed. I took a breath, a full one, like fresh air had filled the room. I hadn't breathed like that in days. The pain in my side, the deep ache in my kidneys began to fade. Not all at once, but like waves pulling back into the sea. The cramping in my stomach softened. The pressure in my chest lifted. My arms, which had felt like stone, started to move again. I slowly placed my palm flat on the ground and pushed myself up to my elbows. I expected dizziness, but none came. I sat there, confused, blinking in the dark. My body didn't feel strong, but it felt steady. I touched my face. The fever was gone. I looked at my hands, still thin, still shaking slightly, but I could feel strength returning. I pulled my legs in and sat upright. The cold that had wrapped itself around my bones was lifting. I began to cry, not from pain, but from the overwhelming shock of it. I whispered, "Jesus, what are you doing?" But in my heart, I already knew. He was healing me. I stayed sitting for a while, just breathing. I didn't rush. I didn't move fast. I closed my eyes and let the warmth continue flowing through me. I remembered his words. "I am the resurrection and the life." I felt like I had died in that cell. And now something new had taken its place. A peace unlike anything I had ever known filled me from head to toe. I slowly moved to my knees. I placed both hands in front of me and pressed them to the floor. I bowed low, not to beg, not to cry for help, but to worship. My lips moved, slow at first, then clearer. I began to pray. "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me. I am yours." I stayed like that for a long time. Then, with careful effort, I stood to my feet. I swayed at first, but I didn't fall. My legs held me. I was standing, alive, once steady. I lifted my hands in the darkness. There were no windows, no lights, just stone walls. But I raised my arms anyway and began to sing, quietly. The first line came from a song I had once heard a Christian prisoner whisper during her last hours. I never forgot it. "You are near to the brokenhearted. You save those crushed in spirit." My voice was thin but real. I sang slowly, words falling from my lips like water. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. I didn't care who heard me. For the first time in my life, I didn't sing for power or approval. I sang because I was free. My body was still in chains, but my soul was alive. And I knew without doubt that Jesus was in that cell with me. Not just as a feeling, but as a fire, a quiet, burning, unshakable truth. The footsteps came fast. I didn't stop singing. I heard keys jingle. The metal door creaked open just slightly, the light from the hallway spilling in like a blade. A guard peered inside. His face was pale. He stared at me, standing, arms raised, lips moving in song. He froze. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he shut the door quickly and ran. I could hear his footsteps echo down the corridor, louder than usual. They weren't slow. They were panicked. I stood still, heart pounding, not from fear, but awe. The darkness returned, but I didn't feel it. I kept singing. I had no idea what they were going to do next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. I never would be. The same cell that once felt like death was now holy ground. Not because I changed it, but because Jesus entered it. And wherever he is, that place becomes fire. It didn't take long for them to return. This time it was 2 guards and a doctor. I recognized him, Dr. Saleh. He had worked for years with Hamas, handling medical reports for prisoners. He never smiled, never spoke much. He stepped inside with a flashlight and clipboard. I was still standing. The guards watched from the door, not daring to come closer. He looked me over from a distance. "Sit," he said. I obeyed. He checked my pulse. His face twitched. He listened to my chest, then checked my eyes. His movements became quicker, sharper. He touched my wrist again. "You had no food for weeks," he muttered. "No fluids. Organs should have shut down." He pulled out a small light and checked my pupils. "You should be in a coma," he whispered. Then he looked straight at me. "What is this?" he asked, but it wasn't really a question. It was fear. I said nothing. I only smiled. The doctor stood up without another word and left. The guards followed, saying nothing. The door slammed shut. But I knew something had changed. They had seen me, alive, standing, singing. That wasn't possible. Not in their world. Not in their system. One of the guards returned hours later with a tray of food. It slid through the slot and landed with a soft clatter. Bread, rice, a small bottle of water. It was the first meal I had seen in over a month. I looked at it for a long time, but didn't touch it. I walked toward the slot. The guard hadn't left yet. I whispered through the opening, "I don't need your food. He feeds me." There was silence. Then a whisper back. "She has become one of them, a light in our darkness." I stepped away and knelt again. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just worshipped. Because what I had now, no one could take. The next few days were quiet. No more beatings. No more interrogations. Guards passed my cell slowly. Some peeked in but said nothing. Others avoided it completely. I could hear them whispering outside. Some said I had gone mad. Others said I had been touched by something holy. One guard refused to even walk past my door, saying, "There's fire in that room." I smiled when I heard it. He was right. Not a fire that destroys. A fire that heals. A fire that saves. I kept praying, kept singing. My body was weak, yes, but I had never felt stronger. Every breath was a gift. Every moment a miracle. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't care. Whether I lived or died, I belonged to Jesus. And that truth burned brighter than any light I had ever known. Even in the darkest place in Gaza, I was no longer afraid. The silence in the prison had changed. It was no longer the silence of fear or routine or darkness. It had become the silence of something broken, something that didn't know how to continue. The guards no longer shouted. They walked more slowly. When they passed my door, their eyes didn't meet mine. I could feel it in their steps. Something was wrong in their system, and somehow I had become the crack in the wall. I wasn't supposed to be standing. I wasn't supposed to be breathing. My name should have been crossed off the files by now. But I was still there, alive, strong, singing, and they didn't know what to do with that. From inside my cell, I could hear them whisper, "She should have died." Maybe she already did. Some of them didn't even call me by name anymore. They said, "That woman with the fire." Their fear was no longer hidden. It was spreading. One afternoon, 2 men in black suits came down into the hallway. They walked with authority, clipboards in hand, and a guard trailing behind them. I recognized one of them from my time as commander. He had been a high-ranking official, cold, proud, always speaking with finality. Now he stood outside my cell, hesitating. He didn't open the door. He just stared through the slot. Then, without saying a word, he turned and walked away. I heard them speaking in hushed tones near the stairwell. The guard who had been feeding me every few days stood nearby, nodding silently. I knew something was happening. Later that evening, the same guard returned. He looked nervous. He pushed a meal through the slot. A full tray with rice, bread, lentils, and a bottle of clean water. I didn't touch it. I simply said, "He still feeds me." The guard didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. He stood there for a long time, just staring. That night, I heard my name spoken in anger. Loud voices upstairs. My father had come. I knew it from the sound of his shout. His voice hadn't changed, sharp, commanding, full of fire. But this time it wasn't fire for me. It was rage. "She is a demon," he shouted. "She has brought shame into our house." Another man tried to calm him. But my father was not a man who listened to reason. I said, "Kill her." Quietly. "Why is she still alive?" Then silence again. Heavy. Still. My heart pounded. I stepped back from the door, afraid he would come down, open it, face me. But he never did. The door remained closed. He left without a word. No farewell. No final glance. I had once been the jewel in his crown. His trusted hand. His daughter. Now I was a ghost to him. Dead in his eyes. Erased from his bloodline. But I felt no hatred in return. The next day, Jawad returned. The interrogator who had questioned me before. I remembered how he had mocked me. Laughed when I said nothing. But this time he looked different. His suit was still pressed, his shoes polished, but his hands trembled. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. No guards. Just the two of us. He didn't sit. He stared. His eyes scanned my body from head to toe. I stood in the center of the room, hands folded calmly in front of me. My posture straight. My eyes steady. "You should be dead," he said quietly. "We saw your reports. The doctor said your kidneys had failed. You hadn't eaten. You were gone." I nodded. "You're right," I said softly. "That woman you arrested, she did die. Right here on this floor." I pointed to the corner where I had once collapsed. "But I'm not her anymore. I was raised by someone else." His face lost all color. He didn't speak for several minutes. Just stood there, jaw clenched, breathing slow. Finally, he asked, "Who raised you?" I smiled, not mocking, not proud, just full of peace. "Isa," I said. "The Messiah." He flinched like I had slapped him. He turned and opened the door without another word. As he walked out, I heard him whisper to one of the guards, "Don't touch her again. Don't go near her. She's not normal." That was the last time I saw him. After that, things began to shift quickly. The guards who used to laugh no longer spoke. The ones who brought food did it in silence. Some even left small extras on the tray, dates, more water. I never asked for anything, but they gave it anyway. One guard, younger than the rest, once whispered through the slot, "They say you are with him." I looked at him through the small opening. "I am," I replied. He nodded and disappeared. Soon, whispers began to reach other cells. I heard my name in hushed voices. Prisoners asking each other, "Have you heard?" I didn't know how the story spread. Maybe the guards talked. Maybe one of them couldn't stay silent. But word got out. And with it, a name I never expected to hear in those tunnels. Isa al-Masih. The Arabic name for Jesus. I heard it again and again. Some whispered it in fear. Others with hope. The atmosphere in the prison changed. It was still cold, still cruel. But something unseen had broken loose. I felt it in the silence. The system, the fear, the power, it was cracking. Not with noise, but with presence. The presence of the one they couldn't lock away. I didn't try to lead. I didn't preach. I simply kept worshiping, praying, singing in the dark. And the light, though invisible, kept growing. Even in the hearts of those who once thought it impossible. One morning, the cell door creaked open. No warning, no footsteps. Just the cold metal dragging slowly. A man I had never seen stood outside. No uniform, no gun, just a clipboard in his hand. He didn't say my name. He simply said, "Come with me." I didn't ask where. I followed. We walked in silence through the tunnel hallways. The same ones I had patrolled as a commander. The same ones I had collapsed in as a prisoner. Now I walked them free, not by man's decision, but by God's hand. The guards we passed didn't meet my eyes. One even stepped aside, bowing his head slightly. We reached the exit. A narrow stairwell that led to the ruined apartment block above. Sunlight streamed in through the cracks. I blinked. It was so bright I had to shield my face. I hadn't seen daylight in more than a month, but it didn't burn. It welcomed me. Outside, the street was quiet. Dust hung in the air. The wind moved through the alley like a whisper. At the edge of the road, a black car was parked. Simple, unmarked. The man who had led me stopped and pointed. "You're free to go." I looked at him, waiting for more, but he said nothing else. I turned toward the car. My feet felt heavy, like the world had changed its weight. I walked slowly, each step a piece of the old me falling off. When I reached the car, I saw him, my father, sitting in the passenger seat. He didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his hands clenched on his lap, his jaw tight. The man who once called me his lioness, his pride, his daughter. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. I stood there for a moment, waiting, hoping, but there was nothing. No words, no goodbye, no recognition, only silence. I turned away. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I just felt finished, like a door had closed behind me, and I no longer needed to knock on it again. I stepped onto the street and walked. No destination, no plan, just free. Every breath felt new. Every sound felt louder. The city of Gaza hadn't changed, but I had. The same streets I had once walked in power, I now walked in peace. I was no longer afraid. Not of men, not of death, not of rejection, because I had already lost everything and found something greater. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know where I would sleep that night, but I knew this. I was not who I used to be. I was not a weapon. I was not a traitor. I was not even a prisoner. I was a daughter, a believer, a servant of Isa al-Masih, and I was finally free. The first few days after my release felt like walking through a dream. I stayed in the shadows, moving from street to street with my head down and heart wide open. I had no home to return to. My father had erased me from the family. My name no longer brought respect. It brought danger. But I wasn't afraid. I was exactly where Jesus wanted me to be. One night, I found myself near the edge of Rafah, where I had once ordered secret raids. Now I knocked gently on the door of a small, broken house with no lights. A narrow-eyed woman opened the door, eyes full of suspicion. When I said the secret phrase, just a few words from the Gospel of John, her face changed. She stepped aside, and there, in the back room, I saw them. 15 men and women sitting on the floor, heads bowed, Bibles hidden in cloth. The underground church. I had found home. They didn't know who I was at first. I had to explain carefully, slowly. I told them my name, just my first name, and how I had once tortured people like them. I expected them to turn me away, maybe even call the authorities. But instead, they listened. When I finished, one woman crawled over and wrapped her arms around me. "He redeems all stories," she whispered. That night, I wept in their arms. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't lost. I was part of a body I once tried to destroy. In the weeks that followed, I began to share my testimony, first in whispers, then in prayers, and finally in full. I met with small groups in hidden homes and dark alleys. People would pass notes under doors just to ask me to speak. Each time, I would begin with the same line. I was dead, but he gave me life, and eyes would fill with tears as I spoke. My story began to spread in quiet, dangerous ways. We recorded it once, using a smuggled phone. A young boy uploaded the video late one night. We didn't use my full name, just my face and voice. The internet was slow, the connection unstable, but the video made it out. Within days, believers from the West Bank, Egypt, and even Syria were sending messages through encrypted apps. They had seen it. The commander who found Christ. That's what they called me. I didn't care about the title. I only cared that Jesus was being known. Each time someone reached out, I pointed them to him, not me. But the enemy didn't stay silent. Death threats began to appear. A note under a door. A message from an anonymous account. One read, "You should have stayed dead." Another simply said, "Soon." But none of them shook me. I would smile and say to my brothers and sisters, "It's too late. I already died." With time, God gave me a deeper purpose, something I never expected. Women began coming to me. Not all were believers yet. Some were Muslim. Some were broken. Some were angry. But they came. They had heard my story. Some had even seen me in my former days, spitting orders, mocking faith. Now they saw something different, and they wanted to know what had changed me. So I told them, every time, in back rooms, behind markets, under bridges. I prayed with women who had never heard the name of Jesus. I gave food to those hiding from abusive homes. I opened the scriptures with trembling hands and watched as their eyes filled with hope. One woman who had once guarded prisoners now led worship in whispers. Another who had grown up under militant teachings began memorizing verses from Psalms. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was watching new stories begin. Stories only Jesus could write. There was one moment that changed everything for me. A woman named Samia came to me, face bruised, eyes swollen. She had been beaten by her husband for secretly watching one of my videos. She said she had never cried during pain before, but when he hit her, she wept. Not from the blows, but because she thought she had lost Jesus. I held her hands and said, "He never leaves, not even in the fire." That night, she gave her life to him. Today, she helps lead our women's group in Gaza. And I often look at her and think, this is why I lived. The Lord didn't just save me from death. He saved me for purpose, for witness, for others. My voice had once ordered cruelty. Now it spreads grace. My hands had once delivered pain. Now they lift the broken. My story is not just mine anymore. It belongs to every woman who thought hope was impossible. And now, I speak to you. Yes, you, the one listening, watching. Maybe you're not in a physical prison like I was. Maybe your cell is made of shame, or fear, or addiction, or lies that have wrapped around you so tightly you've forgotten how to breathe. I want you to know something. Jesus walked into my dungeon. He stepped into the deepest darkness of my life, not to judge me, but to rescue me. And if he can do that for someone like me, a woman who mocked his name, spilled innocent blood, and lived in hate, then he can do it for you too. You don't have to fix yourself first. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to say yes. Right now, even if it's just a whisper. Say, Jesus, I need you. That's where it begins. In weakness, in surrender, in truth. He will meet you there, just like he met me. I promise you that.